The call came at 2 a.m., my son Michael's name flashing on my phone screen. I'd been awake anyway, sitting in my study reviewing contracts for work, trying not to think about the wedding invitation sitting unopened on my desk. Dad, his voice was shaking. You can't come to the wedding. Mom and James, they're planning something. I'd overheard them talking. They want to humiliate you in front of everyone. My name is Thomas Barrett. I'm 52 years old, and for the past 8 years, I've watched my ex-wife Sarah systematically try to destroy my relationship with our children. The divorce hadn't been pretty. Few are, but what came after was worse. The lies, the manipulation, the constant attempts to paint me as the villain in our story. Slow down, Michael, I said, keeping my voice calm. Tell me exactly what you heard. He took a shaky breath. They were in the kitchen. James was laughing about some speech he's planning to give at the reception. Something about revealing what kind of man you really are. Mom kept saying it would be perfect, that everyone would finally see the truth. James Henderson, Sarah's new husband. Corporate lawyer, country club member, the kind of man who wore pocket squares and called everyone old sport, as if he were auditioning for The Great Gatsby. He'd been trying to replace me as the children's father since the day he married Sarah. And Mom. Michael hesitated. She's invited all your business partners, Dad. Everyone from Barrett Construction. She said it was time they knew who they were really working with. I smiled, though my son couldn't see it. Thank you for warning me, but don't worry. I've already taken care of everything. What do you mean? Trust me, son. Your wedding day will be perfect. That's all that matters. After we hung up, I walked to my safe and entered the combination. Inside was a thick manila envelope I'd prepared 3 months earlier, when the wedding invitations first went out. I'd known something like this was coming. Sarah had been too eager for me to attend, too insistent that I needed to be there. It wasn't like her. The truth is, I'd been preparing for this moment for 8 years, ever since the day Sarah announced she was leaving me for James. Not out of revenge or bitterness, but because I knew her. I knew she wouldn't be satisfied until she'd taken everything I'd built. I sat back at my desk, thinking about the day Michael was born. I'd been in the middle of a crucial meeting with investors for our first major construction project. When the call came, I walked out without a word, leaving millions on the table. Sarah never understood that. She saw it as another example of my poor business sense, choosing family over profit. But that's who I've always been. I built Barrett Construction from nothing, working my way up from swinging a hammer, to running crews, to managing projects. Every dollar we had, I'd earned through hard work and honest dealings. Sarah wanted more faster. James promised her that. What they didn't know was that I'd documented everything. Every manipulation, every lie, every attempt to turn our children against me. The teenage years were the hardest. Sarah constantly forgetting to tell me about school events, sports games, parent-teacher conferences. Making sure the kids were always too busy during my scheduled visits. But I kept showing up, kept sending messages, kept leaving tickets at will call for games I wasn't supposed to know about. Slowly, the kids began to see through it. Michael first, then his younger sister Emma. They started calling me directly, making their own plans to visit. Sarah hated that. The control was slipping away. 3 years ago, she and James tried to force me out of my own company. They'd acquired shares through a holding company, convinced 2 board members to side with them. The vote was scheduled for a Thursday morning. By Wednesday night, I had evidence of James's insider trading, his use of client funds to finance personal investments. Amazing what people leave in their email when they think no one's watching. The takeover attempt quietly disappeared. James avoided eye contact at school functions after that. Sarah got more subtle in her attempts to undermine me, but she never stopped. When Michael announced his engagement to Catherine last year, I was thrilled. She was perfect for him. Kind, smart, grounded. Sarah hated her immediately. Too simple, she said. Catherine's father was a high school teacher. Her mother ran a small bookstore. Not the kind of family Sarah wanted to associate with. The wedding planning became a battlefield. Sarah pushed for an extravagant country club ceremony, insisting on controlling every detail. Catherine's parents couldn't afford to contribute much, so Sarah used the money as leverage. But Michael stood firm on certain things. He wanted me to be his best man, not James. That's when I first suspected something was coming. I opened the envelope on my desk, reviewing its contents one more time. Bank statements, emails, recorded conversations, 8 years of evidence carefully collected and preserved. But the most damaging pieces weren't about Sarah or James. They were about the people they'd hurt along the way. The small contractors they'd tried to force out of business to make way for James's clients. The employees they'd threatened when I wouldn't sell. The families they'd pressured when their children dared to remain loyal to me. I'd helped those people quietly over the years, provided jobs, paid legal fees, kept them afloat until they could recover. Not for leverage, but because it was right. Because I'd been raised to believe success meant nothing if you achieved it by stepping on others. My phone buzzed again. A text from Emma. "Dad, are you awake? Can we talk?" I called her immediately. "I just talked to Michael," she said without preamble. "About what Mom and James are planning. You have to do something. It's handled, sweetheart. But they've invited everyone. All your business associates, people from the club, even that reporter from the Business Journal who's always writing puff pieces about James." I could hear the worry in her voice. Emma had always been my protector, even as a little girl. When Sarah would start in on one of her tirades about my failings, Emma would suddenly need my help with homework or want to show me something in the garden. Anything to pull me away. "Remember when you were 12? I said, and your mother told you I'd forgotten your ballet recital. But you hadn't. You were there in the back row. You left roses in my dressing room. Because I'd never miss something that important. Just like I won't let anyone ruin your brother's wedding." She was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" "Nothing dramatic. Sometimes the truth is enough." After we hung up, I sent 2 emails. One to Reverend Matthews, who would be performing the ceremony, and one to Catherine's father, David. Both men had become friends over the past year, united in our desire to protect our children from Sarah's attempts to control everything. David replied immediately, "The room is booked for 9 a.m. Catherine says Michael is finally sleeping. We'll see you there." I looked at the invitation on my desk. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m. at the Valley Brook Country Club. Sarah's choice, of course. She'd been a member there since marrying James, loved to remind everyone she was now part of the right social circle. But real decisions would be made in a small classroom at the high school where David taught, 7 hours before Sarah's perfectly planned spectacle. I drove through the quiet pre-dawn streets, the envelope secure in my briefcase. The city was just waking up, delivery trucks making their rounds, early shift workers hurrying to clock in. I passed the first construction site I'd ever managed, now a thriving shopping center. The hospital where Michael was born. The park where I'd taught Emma to ride a bike. This was my city, built through years of hard work and honest relationships. Sarah and James played social games, collected memberships and titles. I'd collected trust. At 8:57 a.m., I pulled into the high school parking lot. David's car was already there, along with Michael's and Catherine's small Honda. Reverend Matthews arrived just behind me. "Quite a morning for a wedding," he said with a gentle smile. "The only morning that matters," I replied. Inside, David had arranged a classroom with simple decorations, white streamers, and a few flowers Catherine's mother had brought from their shop. Michael and Catherine stood together near the windows, holding hands. They looked tired but determined. "Dad," Michael started, but I held up a hand. "This is your day. Your choice. Are you sure this is what you want? They looked at each other, then back at me. Catherine spoke first. We want to be married by someone who cares about the truth, about real love. She squeezed Michael's hand. Not about showing off for society pages. I hugged them both, then took my place as best man. Emma slipped in just as Reverend Matthews opened his Bible, taking her spot as maid of honor. The ceremony was brief, beautiful in its simplicity. No designer dresses, no photographer, no string quartet. Just love, truth, and family. When it was done, when the real marriage certificate was signed and safely stored, I opened my briefcase. Now, I said, let's talk about this afternoon's performance. The look on their faces told me they were ready to hear the plan. Sarah wanted a show. She was going to get one, but not the one she expected. At precisely 3:45 p.m., I walked into Valley Brook Country Club wearing my best suit, the envelope tucked securely in my inner pocket. The grand ballroom had been transformed exactly as Sarah demanded, crystal chandeliers, white roses everywhere, and an ice sculpture of intertwined hearts that probably cost more than Catherine's parents' car. Sarah stood near the entrance, resplendent in a designer dress that screamed mother of the groom, but make it about me. Her smile faltered when she saw me. Thomas, she said, her voice dripping with false warmth. We weren't sure you'd come. Wouldn't miss it for the world, I replied pleasantly. James appeared at her side, adjusting his pocket square. Thomas, good to see you. Looking forward to the speeches later. I'm sure you are. I moved past them, noting the strategic placement of guests. My business associates and their wives were seated prominently, within perfect earshot of the main table where James would deliver his speech. The reporter from the Business Journal, Amy Chen, sat with her notebook ready, just as Emma had warned. Sarah had orchestrated everything perfectly, too perfectly. At 3:50 p.m., the first part of my plan activated. David, Catherine's father, approached Sarah with concern etched on his face. The bride and groom haven't arrived yet, he said. Catherine's not answering her phone. I'd watched Sarah's face shift from annoyance to barely concealed glee. A delayed bride meant more time for socializing, more opportunities for James to work the room, spreading whatever poison they'd prepared. At 3:55 p.m., Emma called Sarah's phone. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I saw Sarah's expression darken. More problems with the timing. The photographer couldn't find the couple either. By 4:15 p.m., the carefully orchestrated schedule was in shambles. Guests were getting restless. Sarah was trying to maintain control, but I could see panic creeping in. James decided to take advantage of the delay. He began circulating among my business associates, champagne in hand, dropping subtle hints about concerning developments at Barrett Construction. I let him talk. Every word was being carefully noted by people he didn't notice, longtime employees I'd placed strategically around the room. At 4:30 p.m., Reverend Matthews made his announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. The room quieted. Sarah moved to take control, but the Reverend continued before she could speak. I have an announcement about today's ceremony. Sarah reached him first. There's just a small delay, she said quickly. Everything's fine. Actually, Reverend Matthews smiled gently. I need to inform you that Michael and Catherine are already married. The silence was absolute. Sarah's face went white. That's impossible, she stammered. I have the marriage license right here. You have a marriage license, I said, stepping forward, but not the marriage license. I removed the envelope from my pocket and handed it to the Reverend. He opened it carefully, removing the official documentation of the morning's ceremony. Michael and Catherine were legally married this morning, he announced. This afternoon's event was intended to be a celebration of that union. However, I continued, given certain plans for this reception, They'd chosen to celebrate privately with those who truly support their happiness. James stepped forward, his practiced charm cracking slightly. "What are you talking about? What plans?" I pulled out my phone and pressed play. James's voice filled the room through the venue's speaker system. "When I give my speech, everyone will finally see what kind of man Thomas Barrett really is. We've got proof of everything. The hidden accounts, the construction kickbacks, all of it. By Monday, Barrett Construction will be looking for new leadership." Sarah grabbed his arm. "Turn it off." "But that's not the interesting part," I said, letting the recording continue. James's voice again. "Once we control the company, we can force through the River Heights development. The environmental concerns are easy to bury, and the kickbacks from rezoning alone will set us up for years." The reporter was scribbling furiously now. Several of my business associates had pulled out their phones, recording everything. "That's inadmissible," James sputtered. "Private conversations can't be recorded without consent." "In private settings, you're correct," I agreed. "But this was recorded in the country club dining room. Public space. No expectation of privacy. And there's more." I nodded to David, who began distributing folders to key guests. These contained documented evidence of every attempt to manipulate this situation. The fake business records you planned to expose today. The manufactured environmental reports for River Heights. Even the bribes offered to county officials. Sarah's carefully maintained composure cracked completely. "You can't prove any of this." "Actually, he can," said a new voice. Amy Chen stood up, press badge now clearly visible. "Because I've been investigating James for months. Mr. Barrett has been cooperating with our investigation, providing documentation of multiple attempts to corrupt local development projects." James lunged for the nearest folder, but two men in suits stepped forward, blocking his path. "FBI," one of them said quietly. "We have some questions about those kickbacks you mentioned." The next few minutes were chaos. James was led away for questioning. Sarah alternated between threats and pleas. Guests began leaving quickly, nobody wanting to be associated with the unfolding scandal. Through it all, I stood quietly, watching 8 years of manipulation and lies crumble. Finally, only Sarah remained, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. "Why?" she demanded. "Why today?" "Because you never understood what really matters," I replied. "You saw our children's lives as opportunities for social climbing. Their happiness meant nothing compared to your ambitions." "That's not true." "Isn't it? You were willing to ruin our son's wedding day just to get revenge on me. To impress your country club friends. What kind of mother does that?" She had no answer. "Michael and Catherine are celebrating their wedding with people who love them unconditionally," I continued. "Emma is with them. So are Catherine's parents, and yes, I'll be joining them shortly. You could have been there too, if you'd chosen love over status just once." I turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Sarah?" "The River Heights project. Barrett Construction won that contract legally last week. We're building affordable housing and a community center. Sometimes doing the right thing is good business too." I left her standing alone in her perfectly decorated ballroom, surrounded by the ruins of her schemes. Outside, the summer evening was beautiful. I checked my phone. A text from Michael with an address. They were gathered at Catherine's parents' bookstore, celebrating with pizza and champagne. As I drove there, I thought about choices. Sarah had chosen ambition over family. James had chosen greed over integrity. I'd chosen to protect what really mattered, no matter how long it took. The bookstore windows glowed warmly as I parked. Through the glass, I could see my children laughing with their real family, people who loved them for who they were, not for the social connections they provided. I'd lost a wife 8 years ago, but I'd gained something more valuable. The truth about what makes a family strong. It's not money or status or power. It's love, honest and unconditional. Walking into that bookstore, seeing Michael and Catherine's genuine smiles, feeling Emma's tight hug, I knew every careful step, every documented lie, every quiet preparation had been worth it. The victory wasn't in exposing Sarah and James. It was in protecting the simple, genuine happiness in that room. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply making sure love wins over lies. The aftermath of the country club incident spread through the city like wildfire. By Monday morning, James was facing federal indictments for corruption and fraud. The FBI's investigation had uncovered a web of illegal dealings far beyond what even I had documented. Sarah's carefully cultivated social status evaporated overnight. But I wasn't focused on any of that. I was sitting in my office at Barrett Construction, looking at old family photos I kept in my desk drawer. Michael's first baseball game. Emma's graduation. The moments that mattered. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. It was Marcus, my head of operations and oldest friend in the business. "You could have told me what was really happening," he said, settling into the chair across from me. I smiled. "Would you have been able to act naturally at the wedding if you'd known?" "Probably not," he admitted. But watching James get led away by the FBI, that was something else. Sarah looked like she'd seen a ghost. "She saw the truth," I corrected. "Sometimes that's scarier than any ghost." Marcus leaned forward. "The board wants to meet. After everything that came out about James' attempts to take over, they're worried about company stability." I nodded, unsurprised. "Schedule it for tomorrow. And Marcus, invite Catherine's father, David. I have an idea I want to discuss." That evening, I received an unexpected visitor at my house. Emma stood on my porch, holding a box of old photo albums. "Found these at Mom's," she said, stepping inside. "She's not doing well." I made coffee while Emma spread the albums across my kitchen table. Pictures of happier times appeared, when our family was whole, before Sarah decided it wasn't enough. "She's been calling Michael and me constantly," Emma continued, trying to explain, to justify everything. "Says she did it all for us, to give us a better life." "What do you think?" I asked, setting her coffee down. Emma was quiet for a moment, flipping through photos. "I think she forgot what actually made our life good. Remember this?" She pointed to a picture of us camping, all squeezed into a tiny tent in the rain. "We were miserable and cold, but you told silly stories all night to keep us from being scared of the thunder." "Your mother hated camping," I recalled. "She hated anything that didn't look perfect on the outside." Emma closed the album. "Dad, there's something else. Mom's trying to sell the old lake house." "The lake house?" "Our weekend retreat during the kids' early years, before Sarah decided country club memberships were more important than family time. I'd let her keep it in the divorce, hoping she'd continue taking the kids there. She never did." "It's hers to sell," I said carefully. "That's just it," Emma pressed. "She can't." I looked up the deed. "You never signed it over to her. You're still co-owner." I took a slow sip of coffee. Must have been an oversight. Emma gave me a knowing look. "Dad, you don't do oversights. You kept it on purpose, didn't you? Just like you kept all the evidence against James." "The lake house holds a lot of memories," I said simply. I wasn't ready to let them go. The next morning, I met with the board, 12 men and women who had helped build Barrett Construction into what it was today. David sat quietly in the back, looking slightly out of place in his high school teacher's clothes among the business suits. "The press coverage is concerning," George, our chairman, began. "Clients are calling, asking questions about stability." "They're asking the wrong questions," I replied, opening my laptop. "Pull up the proposal I just sent, please." On the screen appeared plans for a new project, the Barrett Anderson Education Center, a joint venture between Barrett Construction and Catherine's parents' bookstore, expanding it into a full community learning hub. David, I said, would you explain the concept? Catherine's father stood, his teacher's voice filling the room with quiet authority. He outlined the vision, a place where construction apprenticeships would combine with traditional education, where my employees could teach practical skills alongside academic subjects. We're builders, I concluded, not just of buildings, but of futures. This center proves that commitment. The board's reaction was immediate and positive. By the meeting's end, the project was approved. The press would have a new story to tell, one about building community instead of scandal. As we left the meeting, David pulled me aside. You planned this all along, didn't you? Even before the wedding. Let's just say I believe in being prepared, I replied, for both the worst and the best in people. That afternoon, I drove to the lake house. I hadn't been there in years, but muscle memory guided me along the familiar roads. The place looked neglected. Sarah hadn't maintained it after the divorce, but the bones were still good. As I stood on the dock, my phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Mom's at my house. She's been crying, showing old pictures. Keeps talking about the lake house summers. I texted back, some memories are worth keeping. She misses it, he replied. The real her, I think. Before James and the country club life. I looked out over the water, remembering teaching Michael to fish off that dock, watching Emma learn to swim, family cookouts that lasted until the stars came out. Another text, this time from Catherine. Michael told me about the lake house. We should restore it, make new memories there. An idea began forming, not of revenge or justice, but of redemption. Some things, once broken, can't be fixed. But sometimes you can build something new from the pieces. I called my lawyer. The lake house co-ownership with Sarah. I want to transfer my share. To whom? Split equally between Michael and Emma. With one condition. It can't be sold. Only passed down through the family. Setting up a trust, he asked. Setting up a future, I corrected. Later that week, I received a letter from Sarah. Her elegant handwriting was shaky, the paper tear-stained. I saw what you did with the lake house. You're giving them what I called it. A connection to what really matters. James is gone. The country club friends are gone. All I have left are memories of when I knew what happiness really meant. Take care of our children's future. You always were better at that than me. I folded the letter carefully and put it away. Not out of anger or satisfaction, but as a reminder that sometimes the greatest victory is preserving what's truly valuable. That weekend, Michael, Catherine, and Emma met me at the lake house. We spent the day cleaning, planning renovations, talking about the future. Catherine's parents joined us for a sunset barbecue on the dock. Looking at our expanded family, I realized Sarah's schemes had led to something she never intended. A stronger, more genuine connection between all of us. Sometimes, when people try to tear things down, they accidentally create space for something better to grow. 1 year later, I stood on the renovated dock of the lake house, watching Michael and Catherine's daughter, my first grandchild, take her wobbly first steps across the weathered boards. Emma hovered nearby, ready to catch her niece if needed, while David and his wife set up for the baby's first birthday party. The old house had been transformed. What started as a renovation project had become a symbol of healing. Every weekend, someone from our extended family was there. Catherine's parents hosting reading groups on the expanded deck, Michael teaching local kids to fish, Emma starting a small garden where the unused tennis court used to be. Sarah had come by once, 6 months after everything happened. I was there alone, installing new windows. It looks like it did when we first bought it, she said quietly, standing in the doorway. Better, I think, I replied. Real things usually are. She didn't stay long, but before leaving, she handed me an old photo album I hadn't seen before. I kept these separate, she explained. The pictures that didn't fit my new image. Maybe they belong here now. Inside were candid shots of our early family life. Messy birthday parties, muddy hiking adventures, imperfect but joy-filled moments that never made it to her social media or country club slideshows. James had pleaded guilty to multiple federal charges, accepting a reduced sentence in exchange for information about other corrupt development deals. The last I heard, Sarah had moved to Florida, starting over far from the society circles she'd once desperately wanted to rule. The sound of more cars pulling up broke my reverie. Barrett construction employees and their families were arriving for the party, mixing easily with Catherine's former students and local friends. The Education Center project had been a massive success, creating a bridge between different parts of our community that had never really connected before. Marcus appeared beside me, watching the gathering crowd. "Remember when you said everything would work out?" he asked. "Back when we thought the company might collapse after the scandal." I nodded. "You weren't just hoping, were you? You knew this was possible." "I knew what mattered," I corrected. "Money comes and goes. Reputations rise and fall. But real connections between people, that's what lasts." Michael called everyone to the deck for the birthday cake. Looking at the faces gathered there, my children, their spouses, our extended family of choice, I realized that Sarah and James had actually given us an incredible gift. Their attempt to destroy what I'd built had instead revealed what was truly indestructible. Catherine's father raised his glass. "To family," he said simply. "The one we're born with, and the one we built." Later that evening, as the party wound down and the sunset painted the lake in golden hues, Emma found me in my favorite spot on the dock. "Mom called," she said. "She's doing better. Started teaching at a small preschool." "Good," I replied sincerely. "Everyone deserves a chance to find their real path." "You never hated her, did you? Even after everything?" I watched my granddaughter sleeping peacefully in Catherine's arms nearby. "Hate takes too much energy," I said. "I prefer to spend that energy building something better." The next morning, I arrived early at Barrett Construction. On my desk was a newspaper article about James's sentencing. Below it was a new photo. 4 generations gathered on the lake house dock, smiling genuine smiles. No designer clothes, no stage poses, just real joy. I pinned the photo to my wall, covering the article. Some might call it poetic justice, how Sarah and James's schemes had backfired. But I prefer to think of it as proof that authenticity always wins in the end. My phone buzzed, a group text from Michael. "Lake house this weekend. Emma's teaching the baby to garden, and Catherine's parents are bringing their famous lasagna." I smiled and typed back. Wouldn't miss it. Looking out my office window at the city skyline, I thought about cycles of destruction and creation. Sarah and James had tried to tear down what I'd spent a lifetime building. Instead, they cleared the way for something even stronger to grow. A family bound not by obligation or appearance, but by choice and love. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building something so genuine that those who try to destroy you can only watch from a distance, finally understanding what they lost when they chose deception over truth. I closed my laptop and headed to a meeting of our next community project. There was always more to build, more connections to forge, more real joy to create. And that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all.